Josh Shapiro and I met through an event with the guys from the collective this past summer. We'd been exchanging emails about getting together for a while, but hadn't yet met face to face, so it was a treat to meet him out and about as well as among some watches. Josh has a fascinating background in the educational system. He was a principal, in fact, so he wasn't exactly born into the watch industry. However, as you'll learn, he was kind of primed for it in his own way. Today, his company, J& Shapiro, produces some of the most beautiful watch dials on the planet, and Josh has officially set out to restore watch manufacturing here in the United States. He's a baseball fan, so talk about a big swing, and he's certainly kept his eye on the ball and has seemingly made solid contact. Here's my conversation with Josh Shapiro. I'm your host, Wesley Smith, and you're listening to the Standard H Podcast. Well, again, Josh, I really appreciate the interest and participation. Obviously, a year, maybe year plus in the making, as we've discussed. We'll just jump right into it. I'm kind of curious, like, who was Josh Shapiro at 10 years old?
Who's Josh Shapiro at 10 years old? Uh, a goofy kid that liked baseball and catching lizards and hang out my father's machine shop.
What was the machine shop?
So my grandfather was like a jack of all trades. He started a machine shop, and the sandblasting aspect of the shop became really popular. But he had this huge yard with a ton of old machines everywhere in it. And I would just spend my summers climbing around all this old machinery junk and playing with machines. And I think that had a really big impact on me.
So sandblasting in order to like clean things or strip it of paint or
Yeah. So like a lot of classic cars. So I grew up seeing all sorts of really cool cars all the time coming to my dad's shop. And you get these guys that just bought a new car and now they want to repaint it and they bring it into the shop, we'd blast it, and then they'd find all the Bondo underneath and be super furious and go
right.
back to the original buyer and say, "Hey, you sold me."
So, okay, so in that scenario, then you guys are just stripping it of the paint. Were you guys also a paint shop, or did you just work closely with one?
No, it was just sandblasting. And
Interesting.
it like all sorts of industrial applications too. Like for instance, like light poles before you powder coat them, they had to be sandblasted. There was like, electrical cabinets, all sorts of things need industrial sandblasting. Um, yeah, so constantly having all sorts of fascinating things coming into that shop. And the shop was like on this 1 acre piece of property, and most of it was filled up with junk, either stuff customers had abandoned or projects my grandfather had started, like, oh, I need to build this machine. And he'd go to the junkyard and get a whole bunch of different machines and scrap them to piece them together.
Now, where was this?
This is in South El Monte, which is right by the 60 and 605 freeway.
Yeah, just east of LA. Yeah.
Yeah. My grandfather actually founded the city and was mayor a bunch of times.
No way. That's crazy. I used to go to that Volkswagen dealership.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
Shout out Jamie in service. um, wow, that's cool. Did you have a favorite car that or type of car that would come through?
Oh, yeah. I mean, like, I love the 67 Mustang Fastback.
Okay. Yeah.
A few of those come through my dad's shop, and then we bought one ourselves, and we had this big restoration project. And so I got to drive that in high school. It was pretty awesome.
Are
It
you serious? What color was yours?
was moss green.
And that was your first car?
No, I mean, I got to drive it my senior year. It was my dad's car, but it was our project together. My car before that was an '88 Mustang, which sounds cool, but it wasn't. It was like a super boxy white grandma car. I don't know what Mustang was thinking in the late '80s, but
I know exactly what you're talking about because when I turned 16, my I have a brother who's 4 years older than I am. And he had this friend Amanda, and Amanda was trying to sell her old car so that she could get a new one. It was her senior year, I think. or she may have been even graduated already, but she had like a burgundy or some shade of like off red or whatever of like an 87 Mustang. It was 87 or 88, I think. And couldn't agree with you more. Absolutely hideous car. Um,
I don't know what
but
Ford was thinking, but
well,
I
and
think
then I think it
93
was
they came out with their new design. It was much better.
well, and then between that, I want to say it was like an 89 that like the 5 liter had the lights that almost had like a grid, like a horizontal grid pattern to the lights. It was a distant departure. It may have been like a half type of body style, like a I don't even know what Mustang that would have been at that point. I'm not huge into Fords personally, but the '60s Mustangs were those are by far my favorite of the
Yeah, they're
lot.
incredible. It was so much fun. Yeah.
Wow, that's crazy. Um, so what do you drive now? Since we're already talking cars.
I drive a Model S, a 2018 Model S. It gets great gas mileage.
Yeah. Well, and also couldn't be further from what you do like for a living as far as technology goes.
Right. Yeah. 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 Though it's an American company, American manufacturer.
Well, that's true. Yeah, I'm just thinking technology. Like that's kind of like on one end of the spectrum, whereas you're kind of like vintage vibes, for the lack of a better description.
Yeah. Yeah. Mechanical watches, usually you think uh, engine.
Yeah, yeah. I think I read or heard you speak about kind of your watch journey and how like the jump off point was your wedding watch, was it not? Or
Yeah.
kind of along those lines. What uh what was the watch your wife gave you?
So she got me a nice like $100 Bulova watch. Like she didn't have any money, neither did I. And I had a bracelet on it. So I took it into Feldmar to get the bracelet adjusted. It was my first time ever walking into a fine watch store. And there was this giant poster of a Chrono Swiss Opus, which is a skeletonized chronograph. And I thought it was so awesome. I fell in love right then and there. And
Yeah.
then started collecting watches and buying and selling and then learning as much as I could, taking distance courses. And, I started skeletonizing my own watches,
Oh wow.
really dove in deep, um, obviously.
Yeah. What year was that? Do you mind me asking?
That was that was 12 years ago. August 2011 we got married. So right around then.
Wow. I mean, I've been into watches since, just before then probably. I've been into it probably about 20 years. But even with me, quote unquote, being into watches for 20 years, I've never skeletonized a watch. I've never started my own brand making a watch or creating these like unbelievably gorgeous dials and such. I mean, obviously you have like the lineage of machine shop and kind of that tactile experience with metals and such, but I mean, is that what you sort of tapped into or was it like
I
a
think so.
yeah.
I think so. Like I grew up around a lot of old stuff and collecting old baseball cards and coins, and so that aspect of watchmaking appealed to me, like vintage watches. Like my first nice watch was a vintage Omega.
Oh wow.
So I like that aspect of it. But then as a kid, I had spent a lot of time around metals, like just weird blacksmithing projects I did on my own and smelting projects with my grandfather. So I really, really liked metal. Um, and so the idea of skeletonizing and then eventually making my own parts or doing guilloche and now doing everything all spawns out of just a love of working with metal and different types of metal and forming metal. So watches was just like the perfect thing of history and a collectible object with uh, uh, metalworking coming together. And I love it. I enjoy it a ton.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. Um so you said good research earlier. I teeter on the line of good research and zero research so that I can remain a learner as well, a student, if you will. So I understood your process to be engine turning, um, but then you just threw out the word guilloche, which is also something I'm, familiar with at arm's length. Is guilloche just describes the pattern that is done by engine turning?
Engine turning and guilloche are the same exact thing.
Oh,
Guilloche
it
is the
is.
French word, engine turning is the English word.
Oh, I see. Okay. I was thinking it was different techniques or something.
Yeah, it gets a little confusing. Engine turning, like in the car world, means perlage or spotting. Uh, so like there's all these like mix terminologies between like automotive, gun, and watchmaking,
Mm-hmm.
which is kind of fun.
Yeah,
But
it's
yeah,
really
they're the same thing.
okay. Well, like, how intensive is the work then, as far as like doing the actual engine turn? I mean, it does not look like a lightweight machine. Clearly, it's big, heavy steel looking thing. Obviously, this is going to be an audio only podcast. How do you even describe what an engine turn is, or like what do you even call the machine that does it?
It's called a rose engine or a straight line machine.
Oh,
A rose
okay.
engine does circular guilloche, and a straight line machine does vertical guilloche. Um, so like the Fabergé eggs were made on a rose engine machine, all the beautiful engraving, and then it's enamel on top of it. And so these machines, I guess you could kind of very loosely describe them as like a very advanced spirograph in a way, um, where you're creating these complicated geometric patterns based off of cams on this machine. If anyone's listening, they should just Google it up, a rose engine machine or straight line machine, and
Sure.
that'll give a good visual for these. But the machines I have, they're, some of them are over 100 years old. They're antiques, but we use them 100%. They're not just a museum piece. Um, and that's sort of like after skeletonizing, I went right into guilloche, fell in love, and started making dials, and then started growing the company, and then went on to cases, and now we're making movements from scratch in our workshop too.
Yeah,
It's been a
exactly.
whole evolution.
Yeah, I definitely want to get into that. What does maintenance on a machine look like? Is it routine? Is it common? Or is it once a year? Like, what does that look like?
The machines are really robust. They'll last hundreds of years more, and we just lightly oil them. If
Okay.
anything breaks, there's no one to go to really. Like we have to make our own parts for them.
Sure. Wow. So, do you work with a machine shop to do that?
Oh
Or
no, we've got everything. We've got a complete machine shop. We've got $2 million of state-of-the-art machines and lathes and mills, and we could create, anything watch related or machine related that we need, we can create. Like if it's something larger, like for cars, like none of our machines are large enough for parts that size, but for parts under a foot, we can fabricate anything.
that's insane. Well, not to sound like an awkward question, how do you go from zero to owning $2 million worth of equipment?
Slowly. Slowly. I was very lucky. When I got into watchmaking, it was a hobby, and I was already a teacher and then a high school principal. So watchmaking was like the side hustle. And so everything I made from watches, whether it was buying and selling watches or buying and selling watch machines or making dials for other people, and then eventually the Infinity series, I just put it all back into the company just to build up more machinery, eventually get employees. You know, it took years before I took home anything from the watch business, but I just kept putting it all back in,
Sure.
and just growing it step by step. It was definitely a process.
So, you're completely self funded, no investment, no nothing. You're all independently owned.
Yeah, yeah,
That's unbelievable.
yeah. It's pretty miraculous.
Yeah, congrats. I mean, that's incredible. Um, it occurred to me recently, prior to this interview, obviously, or conversation, as I like to call them, that vintage Rolex they used to use engine turn bezels, if I'm not mistaken. Did they not?
You mean like those fluted bezels?
Well, they're fluted now, I guess, but like even before, I feel like some of the older Rolexes. And God, I'm spacing on the one. Um, it's sort of like a date just. It's got like an aviation name. I'm sure somebody is going to be listening to this and like shouting at their radio station or radio. Like it's called the not the Aviator or Navigator. I cannot remember. The Thunderbird, I think is actually what it's called. Um it was a particular Rolex, but I feel like those bezels used to be engine turned, and I guess now there's the fluted one. So anyway, I only brought this up because I thought you might know the difference in production. If are the fluted ones CNC'd, do you know, or like do you have
Yeah,
any idea?
so the fluted bezels are, I see what you're talking about. The fluted bezels are done with um, a diamond tool that's spinning and cutting them out. Oh yeah, and I
Okay.
see on this old bezel. Let's see, is this engine turning? I think this was done in a similar way too. So to create like that mirror fluted finish is like a spinning diamond tool that cuts grooves into it. Um, and that process has actually been around for a long time, but now
Sure.
it's just automated with CNC. It's actually how they create like the mirror indexes as well, like on watch faces and dials. Like a
Mhm.
Grand Seiko or Rolex, you see like these beautiful mirror dials. It's done by a spinning diamond tool called a faceting tool.
Sure. Like you would have facets on a diamond.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay. Interesting. Well, what about hobnail for those of us who are too lazy to Google?
Ah, yeah. So hobnail, you mean like on a paddock, like the
Sure.
Calatravas that have the hobnail?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's the way Paddock does it is also using a faceting tool. Um, but that can be done traditionally engine turning, like I call it the diamond pattern.
Hmm.
Um, and so yeah, that can go either way. That can be done on like a straight line machine in a very traditional way, or it can be done on a faceting machine. Paddock does it on their bezels using a faceting machine because it's even got a more complex angle since it's the angle of the bezel itself.
Sure. Oh, that's really interesting. All right, this might be a stupid question, but like when making one of your dials and you're using a straight line machine, do you do the pattern in like a substrate, if you will, and then cut the circle to create the dial itself, or do you pre-cut the circle for the dial and then do the pattern on top of the circle?
Oh, that's an excellent question. That's a really, really good question. No one's ever asked me that before. That's a big part of the manufacturing process. Uh, we do both, actually.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and some aspects of it, we engine turn and then we trim the dial. On other ones, um, we have like an insert where we insert the piece of guilloche.
Mm.
On the Resurgence, our new watch where we have like this layered dial, we're doing both where we engine turn and then trim the piece to perfectly align within the dial. And that's sort of how we create this like step terrace guilloche that aligns perfectly.
Oh, wow, that's fascinating. Well, okay, so then when you're creating your patterns, like your Infinity series, for example, like all I see is graph paper being in the mix. Like, do you use graph paper or like do you use any tools or aids to help you, or is it just straight out of your brain?
So it's a lot of math, like very simple, like rise over run, slope intercept math. Like it's like ninth grade math, uh, is a lot of guilloche. Um,
Interesting.
yeah, so like the diamond pattern is two zigzags that come together and make diamonds. And then the basket weave is dividing that diamond into sections. And then the infinity weave is a lot trickier because you use two different size pattern bars to create a tiny basket weave within a basket weave.
Right.
Actually, it's really hard to talk about that, but I did a lecture at the Horological Society in New York
Sure.
in 2019. And in that, I show some videos of how I do the basket weave and how I do the infinity weave. It's impossible to just explain to someone. They'll fall asleep faster than the high school kids did in my class.
Right. Okay, so you taught math.
No, I taught history.
Oh,
I
okay.
taught history, I taught English, taught STEM, I taught PE. Once I became a principal, I kind of filled in and taught whatever class I couldn't find a teacher for.
Do you feel like that makes a good principal having that kind of wide breadth of experience? Or
I don't know what makes a good principal. A good principal is someone that's, I thought I was patient, but a good principal is much more patient than even I am. Uh,
I mean, you're making watches now, so I guess there's something to be said for that.
right, yeah, there's people that are even more patient than that. It's got to be one of the most rewarding and difficult jobs on the planet, being a high school principal.
Yeah, I can only imagine. I mean, obviously teachers deserve all the respect in the world. I mean, the good ones anyway.
Yeah.
The Yeah, it's interesting going back to sort of your process and actually creating these things. Are you wearing any sort of magnification or like a loop or anything? Or are you doing this all
No,
make?
so when I'm on the engine turning machines, I'm typically working at like 20x magnification under a
Oh,
microscope.
wow. 20x. Wow, that's cool.
Yeah,
So,
like the infinity
where
weave is so microscopic, you need a visual aid.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd imagine. Um so when you're doing 20x though, is that projected like on a screen or is it just like quite literally
No,
like
I'm
a
looking through the
microscope?
eyepieces.
Oh wow. Like where do you even source one of these machines? Obviously, like you said, it's like 100 years old. So like where did your machine come from?
Yeah, so my machines have come from all over the place. It's a lot of networking and knowing the right people and catching people when they're like retiring out of the business or passed away. It's like you really got to keep your close to the ground. I assume it's similar like in the vintage car world. You know, you've got people that have crazy vintage car collections and either they let one go or they pass away and there's a sale or an event. And that's how it kind of goes with these extremely rare machines. And they come from all over the world. And I found them anywhere from just people I've networked with in the United States to like looking at classified listings in Europe in the middle of the night when I can't sleep and are looking for these machines. So it's been a crazy journey to acquire them all. I have 8 different engine turning machines, 4 straight lines and 4 rose engines.
Now, is it a situation where like you're using one and the other three serve as backup in case something goes wrong, or is that because you now have employees and all 8 of you are using the machines at once?
It can be that multiple people are on them at once, but it's also for different setups.
Hmm.
Um, so I could have one machine that's set up to do one pattern, and another machine that's set up to do another pattern, because it can
Right.
take a long time to set up the machine, and that's just wasted time.
Sure.
Also, the machines, frankly, are great investments too. Like when you have something rare like that, it only goes up in value. So it's a tax write-off and it's an investment, and I can use it to help my company grow, and they look super cool. So
Yeah. Yeah. I can't argue at all with that. It sounds like a very wise purchase.
yeah.
So I know that you're looking to kind of make everything in house aside from hairsprings, right?
Yeah, though we're looking to do that too.
Oh, cool.
We're close on that. Yeah. Yeah. So on this resurgence, we made everything except for the jewels, and the mainspring and the hairspring, uh, and the crystal and strap and things like that. But all the
The
like the
guts.
case,
Yeah.
yeah, every single component of the case, the dial, the hands, and everything inside of the movement, which is the really big deal.
I know hairsprings because I know Cameron Weiss a little bit too. And I know he'll make parts for other brands and companies as well. I'm sure once you're fully up and running and doing this like as a major part of your business, you'd be doing the same. What is it about hairsprings that is kind of like the last thing to go in house? Is it just because the accuracy has to be just like next level, or like what gets in the way of making that like the first foray? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I think the jewels and springs are very left field from everything else that's made in a watch. Like machining sapphire, there's some similarities, but it's very, very different. And then springs is very, very different from anything else you're doing in watchmaking. So hairsprings, we actually, and I shared my supplier with this. I got hairspring wire formed in the United States, and then we're actually going to experiment doing the coiling ourselves and the heat treating. And the springs we already have are just flat, so we're already doing the Breguet overcoil and vibrating them. So even though we're getting springs from Switzerland, we're still doing a big part of the process with them. While we're experimenting to see if we can do like make a completely US made hairspring. The one I'm not interested in touching is mainsprings. Mainsprings are even more challenging than hairsprings. Um, and there's companies that are completely dedicated to that. Plus,
Mhm.
the FTC, the Federal Trade Commission, that kind of monitors US made, and they like a super high barometer. Mainsprings kind of qualify as like a battery because it's consumable. It's something you replace always with the watch.
Interesting.
Or at least that's how I view it.
Mm-hmm.
That's the one I have the least interest in, and I think that's the one that you'll like a watchmaker can make jewels. It's very challenging. And hairsprings, if you can get the wire formed, can be done like Moser does it. But mainsprings, that's like so specialized, and it's such an inexpensive component that people usually outsource that.
Sure.
And most companies outsource everything in the watch anyway. Like in
Right.
Switzerland, it's normal. Like everything is a subcontractor. Everything's sourced out. That's just how they do things there. In-house really means proprietary in Switzerland, like manufacturer, in-house, all these things. Very rarely are they actually doing everything in their own workshop. It just means it's a proprietary movement to them.
So it's how it's put together, basically. Is
Yeah, it's more like, you have like a watchmaking company that hires out a firm to design them a watch, and then they go to various different suppliers to bring it all together. And then maybe that watchmaking company does the final assembly in their own workshop, or maybe they do some of the finishing in their own workshop. Um, but that's sort of like standard for most independents, most Swiss watch companies. And that's fine. That's a great business model. It's just I wanted to go the extra mile and do it like Roger Smith does it and Kari Voutilainen does it, where they do everything themselves. That was always my personal grail, to do everything myself in my own workshop. It's part of our mission statement. It's very important to us.
Roger Smith, interesting you should bring him up because he's famously said that he can't afford his own watches, and he also daily wears an Explorer 1. So what's your daily watch? Do you wear one of your own?
I mean, I have this prototype, which is the Resurgence. So
How convenient.
yeah, I get to wear that when I want to, but it doesn't feel like it's mine because I need to show it for the company and make sales off of it. And it's not something I can just wear and enjoy myself. Um, but I mean, like, I have like a small vintage collection and some Grand Seikos uh, that I enjoy wearing. Most of the time, I actually go without wearing a watch, just simply because if I'm wearing a watch now, I'm really thinking about watches all the time. Even when
Right.
I go home, like I like to not wear a watch because otherwise I'll start looking at the watch and thinking about design ideas, or my mind just goes wild every time I see a watch. So I actually, but my son, my 3-year-old boy, I have 4 kids. My 3-year-old boy wears a Casio like nonstop, night and day. He never takes it off ever
That's great.
because he knows daddy makes watches and he likes wearing his watch. So
Wow.
it's kind of cool.
That's got to make you hold your head high.
Yeah, yeah, it's very cute.
That's really great. Yeah, I know what you mean about like wearing the product as well, and how it serves pseudo like a billboard, if you will. Like with mine, it's a little different. Which, well, I guess it's similar for your. You probably try to mitigate the number of scratches that come on your prototypes, but like to my point, like so what I started to say was like I have to take care of these things. Like if I spill spaghetti sauce or something like on a jacket that's a prototype, like you know what I mean. So I definitely understand what you're saying, which is funny because as a result I'm usually wearing the rejects or like something that's not going to be produced, or like something that's just like, okay, well, this is the terrible one, which is counterintuitive. You'd think I'd be wearing the nicest of the nice to advertise, but it's like, no, I gotta have to sell those, you know, like
Yeah, right.
I have to preserve them and keep them nice.
What
That's
is
too
it? Don't
funny.
taste the product.
Right. You know, your own supply, as you might say. Um, so when you first like sort of delved into the idea of making your own movements, were you hiring other people to create those parts, or have you always been the one behind the scenes to do everything yourself, including the finishing?
No, no. So I have a whole team, so we work on it together. I have two guys that are incredible finishers. Artur Akhmeyev, he has his own brand. He works for me 75% of the time, 25% works on his own brand, but he's incredible hand engraver, incredible finisher. And Spencer, when he was in watchmaking school, not all he did, but like his favorite thing to do was like inward angles and anglage and beveling. And
Cool.
so those two guys do incredible finishing. And then, um, I did a lot of the design work. Michael Rose, one of our watchmakers, he designed one of the movements and has done a lot of the work on the internals of the components. We hired Matthew Kluger, who's a French uh, watch technician, and he kind of checked the math on everything that we did and gave us some hints and tips. But like all the design work, all the center distances, everything, like we do ourselves. Yeah.
So when designing the movements, is that your conception, or is it a nod you know, who provides inspiration for that kind of thing?
Yeah, so the Resurgence has three different movement variations. And um, one, I kind of took inspiration from this old Swiss pocket watch company that went out of business in the 1920s. It's got this very curvy design to it, and I kind of made that my own. And then the second design was like a very traditional design with finger bridges. So I kind of designed that my own way. And then the third one was Michael's design, which is this very cubist square design with a ton of inward angles in it. So I like playing with different designs. Like bridges and plates are relatively simple compared to making all the guts of the watch, the pinions, the wheels, balance components. All these things are very challenging, but they're interchangeable between the three movement designs. So once we were already making all those internal components, I decided let's explore all these different movement variations and have fun with it.
Do you gain inspiration or get inspiration from more traditional art as well? Like, are you going to art museums looking at paintings? Like, are you into that kind of thing? Or is there any sort of movement that's like, you seem like you'd be a Bauhaus fan?
Yeah, no art inspirations.
Interesting.
I'm looking at cars a lot more for inspirations for like the next models. Like I've really taken a deep dive into car design in the car world and
Cool.
really looking at sports cars in a way I've never looked at them before. In terms of watches, though, what I've come out so far, just inspired by Lapine and Abraham Louis Breguet and George Daniels and Roger Smith. I've always liked that traditional, and I've kind of taken it and transformed it into my own vision.
How do you think like the automotive inspiration will present itself? More on the dial side or the movement side?
I think on the case side,
Okay.
I think on the case side, like body design language in cars is has a lot of curves and surfaces to it and a lot of
Yeah.
organic shapes and like really invoke speed. And kind of transferring that to an object like a watch is both challenging, but also kind of fun and exciting.
You're no stranger to, I don't know, a five-figure price tag, maybe even six, I guess, for your pieces. Do you ever foresee making a watch that's perhaps more affordable? But to the masses, I mean, I mean, obviously, affordability is a subjective thing, but
Right, yeah. No, I'd really like to, and I think the long-term plan is to first build the infrastructure doing these expensive watches.
sure,
Once I've gotten all the machinery, all the equipment, everything I need, um, to do expensive watches in the hundreds, that'll set me up well to be able to do watches in the 10,000 or $5,000 range a little bit easier,
sure,
if it makes sense. We'll have to see, but it's definitely something I'd like to get to. But
cool.
um, because I don't want to just buy a movement or harvest a movement. A lot of people harvest movements from other watches, but if I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it from scratch and do it here.
Could you only I because this happens in my industry, meaning apparel, all the time, where like I might come up with a great design, make it here, and then once it's kind of like a proof of concept, then I'll outsource, not me personally, but brands in general. Then you can outsource it to Asia or wherever to do it on the cheap. I have zero interest in doing that, but I would think for something mechanical, it's probably a little, I don't know, not taboo's not the right word, but do you know what I mean? Like the anguish it would provide for fans might be less. Um, I guess mitigated is the best word to say that for someone like yourself. So you could still design the movement, but then just have it made elsewhere to spec for cheaper, couldn't you? Or is that not really something that's a thing?
No, I mean that's what's done all the time. Like that's 99% of the industry, either going to Asia or going to Switzerland, or sometimes it's one and the same. Um, but that's not what I want to do.
Sure.
I want to I want to do everything here and as much as I possibly can in my workshop. I can control the quality. Um, that's a really important point of the mission statement. Um, and I really want to restore American watchmaking. And the best way I can do that is by doing things here. Like if I start outsourcing things to other countries, then I'm building up their watch infrastructure. And I'd really like to build up the infrastructure again in the United States here, whether that
Yeah.
means me supplying to other people, which is already happening, or doing what we're doing with our watches and inspiring other people to do it from scratch.
Oh, that's awesome, man. Yeah, no argument here as somebody who's doing that with apparel. So that's great. Yeah.
Even if I've got all the equipment in place, um, to make a $10,000 or $5,000 American made watch in my workshop, even if I've got all the equipment for that, which I'm close to now, there's doing it at scale,
Right. Right.
which means getting more and more of the same machinery, and then all the employees, highly skilled labor for all of that,
Mm-hmm.
and doing that at a price point that can make sense. So that's not an overnight process. Even if I wanted to, right now, someone gives me $100 million and says, Josh, I want you to make 30,000 watches made completely in the United States right now. I couldn't even find enough skilled labor
Right.
to pull that off. Like if I hired every watchmaker in the country, then maybe I'd be able to do it. But like watchmaking schools are, only turning out maybe like an average of 10 students a class. And more and more the schools are shifting to just turn them into service robots. Um, like they're taking away more and more of the actual watchmaking in the curriculum. And it's more and more just about how do we churn out and service Swiss watches as quickly as possible.
Yeah. What is your production annually currently?
Ours is very small. We're going to be doing about 36 watches a year.
Okay. Cool. That's awesome, man. So did you go to watchmaking school at all?
So I did a distance learning course with the British Horological Institute. I took their first year course, which gave me a lot of basics.
Sure.
Let me know that I don't want to go into service. Um, and I kind of like immediately went into the machining and guilloche side of things, like
Yeah.
right after I finished doing that distance learning course. Um, and that's where my focus has been ever since, is building up this company and growing my own personal skills and growing my team skills, because a lot of what we're learning is knowledge that's only in Switzerland, and we have to rediscover a lot and figure out a lot, or talk with a few people in the country here that know what they're doing and learn from them.
Have you always been a self-starter like this, or like did you get encouragement from your dad, or like cuz I mean, I would imagine starting a watch business from scratch doesn't, solicit a lot of people to come knocking down your door telling you how wonderful of an idea this is, right? So like, and I mean, it's the same in apparel. Like, I mean, it's a saturated market to say the least for myself. So I had a ton of people in my life telling me like, what are you doing? Like, why are you doing this? Like, don't do this. Did you hear any of that, or how have you dealt with that?
I think since I did it so step by step, and it was like my side hustle.
Yeah.
So like if the company failed, it was still just like a hobby. So like I was kind of lucky in that way. Like um, I didn't have a lot of like free time, but like I didn't have the pressure from watchmaking at the beginning. Like I didn't quit my job and go all in into
Right.
watchmaking. I did it kind of step by step. So when I finally did quit my principal job, um, the watchmaking side of things was completely established.
Yeah.
I think if I had, like, people would have thought I was absolutely crazy, like a young family and like quit like a stable job to just go for it. That would have been a little crazy. But I had tutoring companies before this too. So I'd started my own businesses a few times. Like I had a tutoring center, and then I had like a one-on-one tutoring company. Um, and they did okay. Um, they weren't like a big deal or anything, but kind of got my feet wet in the business world.
Sure.
And then running a school was like gravity training. Like it was running a school is the hardest business on the planet. Like running any company and compared to doing a school is
A breath of fresh air.
yeah, yeah.
Oh,
Running a
that's
school, you're
crazy.
dealing with teenagers, their parents, and teachers that have to deal with their parents and
Yeah.
teenagers.
Yeah.
So
It's a lot of moving parts and a lot of opinions, I would imagine.
yeah.
Um, that's really interesting. Well, how do you decide kind of like when you want to collab with somebody and collaborate on a product versus, taking away from your own production? Like I'm pretty familiar with, like, you've done some work with the collective, you've done some dial work with Hobring, with Messina Lab. Like, how do you, or is that just help, paying the bills kind of thing?
No, it's not paying the bills because I say no to a lot of stuff. Like I want to work with people I like. I want to work with people that understand what it is to be an independent. Like I'm not like a massive company that like, okay, it's time to make engine turn dials. Like I'll have 50 at your door tomorrow. Like,
Right.
it's a tremendous process, and there's going to be all sorts of unexpected things. And um, so I am very careful with who I work with. In general, I'm finding that uh, like people that are not Swiss based enjoy working with someone that's not Swiss based, because in Switzerland, like there's a high kind of barrier, like the Swiss communicate in a certain way and are more wary of people not in Switzerland. So it can be difficult to, as an outsider, to work with them. Um, and also their like the way just the way they reply in emails or like suppliers, it's tricky. It's like you have to kind of understand and navigate. Helps tremendously if you can speak French. Um, so people don't have to deal with that when they work with me. So that's kind of nice. And then I also can choose like projects that excite me, that I'm interested in, that are a challenge, that are interesting too. Um, and also it's not cheap.
Right.
So like sometimes I'll have people come up to me and like, want to do a project, and I have to let them know that like it's really, really expensive to do prototyping. And
Yeah.
this is what it's going to cost. And almost all the time people like run away screaming.
Yeah.
But people that are already in the business, like they get it. They know. They don't run away screaming. They understand why the costs are so high.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's the same over here. Well, it's crazy how much overlap you and I have in experience with such different products. That's really interesting.
Yeah, I think, yeah. I mean, like any product based company, I think is going to have a lot of similarities,
Yeah.
just like the nature of the beast.
Do you have any sort of grail, if you will, collaborations in mind? Like who would you yeah, like who would you want to work with that you haven't already, I guess is a better question.
I don't know. I don't know. It'd be cool. I mean, it'd be cool to work with a super hyper car maker. Like that would be really fun.
Oh, so like non-watch related even.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, like uh within the watch world, like I don't know. Like, no one's ever asked me that. I'd have to think about that before. But I've thought a lot about the car world. I think that would be really fun to do a collaboration in the car.
Are you familiar with Black Badger?
Yeah.
James? Do you know James?
I think I've been introduced to him. I can't remember. Maybe not actually.
I can put you two together because he's pretty tight with McLaren and a couple of others. So I mean, I don't know if you're a McLaren fan or not, but I'm just thinking what connections there might be with this podcast and supercars.
Yeah. Yeah, he does super cool stuff though.
Yeah.
Cool stuff.
When you're not working, I mean, obviously you've got three kids, so I'm sure you're very busy, but like, what are some of your hobbies? Like, what do you enjoy doing outside of this?
So I used to rock climb all the time,
Oh, cool.
but I'm old. I'm I'm old and breakable now.
The fingered tendons aren't as strong as they used to be.
It's the wrists that are giving out because I it's both engine turning and rock climbing are not complementary to each other.
Mm.
We've got a sim racer now at the workshop, so that's a lot of fun.
What's your favorite track?
Red Bull Ring.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Assuming you get to choose your car, is there a common car that you like to race around Red Bull Ring?
Oh well, we've been playing a lot of Gran Turismo at the
Okay.
office, and they like have like these online time trials. So they like give you a car, and you compete against everyone else in the world, and it's like who can get the best lap time.
Wow.
So you're going against like 200,000 other people, like in a car that they've specified, which is cool because it knocks out like a huge variable. Everyone is using the same car, so
Sure.
it's just straight up who can get the best time on the track. Um,
That's what they say in F1 too, amongst the teams, but you know, jury's out.
yeah, reality is a lot different than a sim racer. Like grand, like in a sim racer, it really is like the identical car. Like in
Yeah.
F1, you never know. Like there's
Right.
like a million real world variables.
Do you have a Grail car?
Do I have a Grail car? Uh, I really like it's a Grail but attainable car is the Ferrari 458. It was it Ferrari's
First reliable car.
yeah V8. Uh, they're anywhere from like 200 to $300,000. So can't afford it yet, but
I don't know. I feel like a 458's got to be coming down though, no?
nah, it's going up because it's the last naturally aspirated mid-engine V8. So like everything is either turbo or like
Right.
hybrid.
Right, right,
So
right.
like that's a special car. So the prices really aren't coming down. They were going up for a while, and now they're just maintaining.
I guess I forgot the 488 was a turbo.
Yeah, 488 was a turbo. Yeah.
Yeah, interesting. What was the first CD you ever bought?
The first CD I ever bought. That's a
With your own money?
that's my own money. It's two CDs. Bought them
Oh,
at the same day. It was Bush Razor Blade Suitcase in 1996 and the soundtrack to Beavis and Butthead Do America.
hell yes.
Those were my first two CDs. I listened to
That's
them a million times.
that's unbelievable. I don't know that I've ever. I didn't. Well, likewise, I'm probably got you here, but I didn't realize Beavis and Butt. I don't think I ever had that soundtrack. Who's on that?
Uh, I think it was Rob Zombie before he was Rob Zombie. It was like a White Zombie song. That's one I remember really well.
Like More Human Than Human.
Yeah, I remember
I think
that.
that was a Rob song actually. I don't think that was a White Zombie song.
I can't remember. I mean, I can pull it up in a second, but I'm not going to do that. I'm going to
No,
go with
it's all
straight
good.
memory.
Yeah.
It was like it was an awesome song, but and then the other song on that album was Roller Coaster of Love by the Red Hot Chili Peppers.
Yeah.
Uh, that was like a remix they did of like a '70s song. That was an awesome song. Yeah, that's the only two songs I remember from that album. Those are my two favorite ones.
Do you go to concerts?
I've been to a concert in forever. When
I
I
was
was in
gonna
high
ask you.
school, Summer Sanitarium, Korn, Metallica, like I was big into hard rock then.
Sure.
Yeah, Offspring. That was fun. Been a long time since I've been to a concert though.
So you were a K Rock guy growing up.
Yeah, I was a K-Rock guy growing up for sure.
Oh, that's cool. What's the last thing you've done for the very first time?
Last thing I've done for the very first time. It could be the sim racing thing. Like I've never like we bought like a steering wheel pedal set, the whole thing, and I never paddle shifted before. So that was the first time doing it on the sim racer. For that, I just used the controller, and I've always driven like automatic cars. Yeah.
That's cool. Well, dude, thanks so much for taking the time. This has been a lot of fun. Is there anything else you wanted to promote or share or how people can find you? All that good stuff?
Yeah, we're on Instagram, Jane Shapiro Watches, same name for our website. And yeah, just keep an eye out. We'll be coming out with a lot of really incredible things over the next few years.
Awesome. So, okay, so that's a good question is like, what's your lead time? So you're already like years ahead as far as like conceptualizing and stuff. You're designing things for like 2025 or whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool.
I think all brands kind of do that. Like, what's my schedule of release is going to be, but
Sure.
Surgeons is sold out for the next 2 years, so we'll be working on those for a while and trying to get going on the next watches.
So you're capping that at what's that production?
I'm not going to cap it, but we're limited to about three a month, so 36 a year. So I'm not artificially capping it. We're just limited by what we can produce.
I see.
But I want to keep increasing that, growing that.
Awesome. Good deal, man. Well, I'd love to come by the shop, perhaps, on one of my next trips up to LA. Obviously, I'm down here in San Diego, but I'm up there for production and stuff all the time. So would love to come check it out. It sounds obviously fascinating. I've seen photos and stuff, and
Yeah, we got a
that
beautiful 7,300 square foot workshop now in Torrance. Welcome to come anytime.
unbelievable, man. Well, congrats on all the success, and again, thanks for taking the time. It really means a lot. And yeah, hope to see you soon.
All right, this is really fun.
Okay, buddy. All right, I'll talk to you soon.
Okay, bye.
This wraps up this episode of the Standard Age podcast. If you like what you heard, I'd love it if you'd share it with a friend or two. And if you have a moment, please rate and review the show as it helps others discover these episodes. It absolutely helps far more than you realize. Shout out to Jensen Reed and Super Beautiful for the theme track. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll catch you in the next one. Take care.